The U.S. Supreme Court has been quite busy and not the good kind. By now, you've heard that SCOTUS has ruled that it is legal for businesses to discriminate against folks in the LGBTQ plus community, shot down student loan forgiveness, and they ruled that using race as a factor in admissions is unconstitutional. In this video, I am going to talk about what are your options? What are some alternatives to staying in a country so heavily committed to continually oppressing and marginalized folks who look like me? But first, if you are new to the Picky Girl Nation, welcome. I am Adelia Abora-Shade, and I'm picky. I am picky about just about everything, but especially when it comes to my happiness. So much so that 7 years ago, so that I could be the happiest version of myself, I permanently left the United States. And to be honest, haven't looked back. On this channel, I share my experiences living abroad, as well as how you can leave the U.S. as well. In my work as a relocation specialist and financial educator, I help people like you become financially confident enough that they can do whatever they want, including moving abroad or traveling the world. All right, y'all, so let's get into it. Like I said, the SCOTUS has been super busy. Right before a holiday weekend, they basically trounced all over Black and brown folks and LGBT folks. There were 3 rulings, as I mentioned. But what I find so interesting about the affirmative action ruling, as well as the legal discrimination. I don't know what they're calling it. Are they framing it as religious freedom? If you look at this tweet from David S. Bernstein, this is what I don't understand. A private business, because this is what they ruled, a private business can choose to deny providing services to a member of a protected class, that is, people who are often marginalized and discriminated against, racial minorities, people of religious groups, LGBT folks. So they said it is legal for a private business to deny service to someone who is in a protected class. But then on the other hand, they said that it is perfectly, if a private university chooses to accept a client from a protected class, that's unconstitutional. What? Okay, but anyway, this is all BS. But here's the thing about it. This is so on brand for the United States, especially the United States as we know it in 2023. If you are my age or older, think back a decade or two to the whole Tea Party movement. From that all the way through the presidential election of 2016, we were hearing all of this language about taking back the country, returning it to the good old days, returning it to its former glory. Basically, they have made it very plain that they do not like us. They want to keep us marginalized, and any progress that had been made, they are dedicated to peeling it back. If basically they've told us, if you are not a cis, hetero, white man who is not poor, because don't think being white will save you. If you're poor, you down here with me, homie. But if you're not a cis, white, hetero man who is not poor, this is bad news. This is like the tip of the iceberg. It continues from here. The more places that your identity intersects, the worse the US is becoming for somebody like you. So if you're a woman and you're brown and you're queer and you're poor, like all of those intersections, they are gunning for you. All right, so if you are watching this video and you or someone you love identifies as LGBTQ plus, and you want to be safe, you want to be in a place that is less discriminatory than the US, you need to check out the Equaldex. I will link it in the description of this video. This is an index that rates equality across countries, also across states in the US, but I'm here to get you out of the US, so we're not going to talk about that. But if you go to equaldex.com, they measure the current status of LGBT rights, laws, and freedoms, as well as public attitudes toward LGBT people in a variety of categories. They look at general equality, whether gay marriage is legal, how, if there are penalties for being homosexual, censorship, gender changing, non-binary gender recognition, discrimination, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, adoption, donating blood, conversion therapy. Okay, that's a great website as you begin your country shopping voyage to help you sort out where are the places you can choose from where you will likely be safer than you are in the US. Because I think what a lot of people miss is if we look at what has happened with the Supreme Court this past week and we look at them as one-off things, we're missing the point. We should remember this is a slippery slope. If you're saying it is legal to deny service to this person, that then opens the door to being able to deny other rights to them. Okay? So same thing with education discrimination. Affirmative action was a response to the systematic inequities that exist in American society. And what the Supreme Court has said is we don't care about that. We will continue to let rich, wealthy, primarily white people use that as an advantage to get their child into a highly selective university or any university. But letting someone in because they are part of a marginalized group that our country has systemically oppressed, no, we're not going to do that. Because everyday life in the US, we've seen this. We've seen it with the incidences of state-sanctioned violence against Black and brown bodies. We have seen it with the lack of punishment that goes, I hate to bring up individual situations, but the mother who the neighbor shot her, the white woman shot the Black woman, they didn't even want to charge her. But anyway. Okay, and so all of these little, what appear to be one-off decisions are part of a greater system meant to keep us subjugated, keep us excluded. And I, for one, say, why stay in a place where you are tolerated? And barely at that, why not go someplace that is more open? And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So if you are Black, you are brown, you are a religious minority, you are LGBT, there are better places for you to be other than the United States. All right, so let's dig into this affirmative action ruling, as well as the student debt forgiveness ruling. Attending university in the United States is ridiculously expensive. As many of people have been talking about, prior to universities being required to admit Black students, college used to be free. But slowly and surely, as they were forced to admit Black students, they had to erect some other barrier to entry, and so that was cost. For that reason and a few others, we've seen the cost of a college education in the US skyrocket. When I went to college in the 90s, in-state tuition in Texas was about $10,000 a year. So that meant a 4-year, no. Now I think about it, my 4-year degree cost $10,000. That's not including housing. That is tuition and fees. But my 4-year degree cost $10,000. And y'all know a 4-year degree now is at that same university in excess of $100K. Okay? So again, if we're paying attention, they are telling us they don't want us. What I'm here to do today is to encourage you to look elsewhere. Now, I am not saying that if you are Black or brown, you can go and there is a country where there will be no discrimination against you. I'm not saying that. But the discrimination, you can maneuver around it better, I think, than you can in the US. In reaction to this week's rulings, I've seen a lot of people online touting HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, as an option as opposed to predominantly white universities. That's a valid choice. However, there is limited capacity at HBCUs. Prior to this, many of them were already struggling to house all of the students they accepted. A good friend of mine has children at a very prestigious HBCU, and this is one of the issues that they're facing. Also, there is a discrepancy in facilities, and that may be a deal breaker for some people. We saw a little bit of this. Remember when Deion Sanders was leaving Jackson State to go to Colorado, and part of that conversation were the facilities available to he and his players. There is going to be some gap, and that's part of what happens in an unequal system like that one that exists in the United States. Again, that may be a deal breaker for some, maybe not for others. But ultimately, these universities are still located in the US, and so cost is still a big factor, especially if you live in a state where there are not HBCUs located. Primarily, HBCUs are found from Texas and then go east across the South. If you are a Black student from Wyoming, Oregon, California, and you want to go to an HBCU, you're going to have to pay out-of-state fees. And so the expense becomes an issue, which could possibly lead to incurring student debt. And if there's anything clear that this week's SCOTUS ruling has pointed out for us, is they don't want to do anything that is going to help regular people or who they perceive to be the recipients of student debt, Black and brown folks. Because we're talking about the plan was to forgive $10,000, $20,000 of student debt. That's not a lot. That's a drop in the bucket. And they said, hell no, we ain't doing that. So HBCUs may be a solution for some people, but there are a lot of people that is not going to solve the problem for them. And so I would like to offer an alternative, and that is attending a university abroad, whether you're doing it for a bachelor's degree, master's, or doctorate. When I mention this as an option, because my youngest, this was her plan. Now, she didn't get her grades together, so this plan did not work. But when we had a conversation about the cost of university, I was like, I can do this much for you if you go to school in the US. But if you go to school outside the US, I can do this much for you, because it is a less expensive experience in a lot of places. First thing that comes up is, but I don't speak another language. You don't have to. There are more than 20,000 bachelor's programs taught in English, 22,000 master's degree programs taught in English, and 2,500 PhD programs taught in English at universities around the world. So the language barrier is not the barrier you think it is. There are also something like 5,000 online programs at foreign universities that are taught in English. I will link below to a site where you can start to get some information on it. For the purposes of this video, it's really hard for me to give y'all lots of details because there are so many options. But this is where your Google skills are going to come in really handy. So you can study in English, and it is more affordable than going to school in the United States. Now, this is not true of every country. Australia, Canada, prices are very close to what they are in the United States. But places like, well, we'll use Germany as a good example. I'll put right here a breakdown of approximate costs for attendance at the University of Cologne for an undergraduate from the US. We're talking about free tuition for an undergrad. You have to kind of make a payment for the semester. That's about less than $350. Health insurance, $1,100. Rent for the year, about $5,000. Books, $300. And I will add this because Germany was the country my daughter was interested in. If you have a student visa in Germany, you can be approved to work 20 hours a week. So now it ranges. Many of the European countries will give free tuition if you are from their country or you are an EU resident. But even when they charge, some of them don't charge anybody to go to university, but even when they do charge, it is generally significantly less than you would pay in the US. So lower costs means you don't have to take out student loans. But if you got your heart set on incurring federal student loan debt, that is still an option when you study abroad. I'm going to include another link below in the description of this video. If you want to know which foreign universities take part in the federal student loan program, there is a list. And so you can check that out there. I'm also going to link to an interview that Stephanie Perry did a few years ago with a Black woman who went to grad school in Europe for free, and they gave her a stipend. And I will link it here, and I will link it in the description. There's already the cost benefit that you can study outside the US and cheaper. Another benefit, because of course you're here on my channel and I am an advocate for leaving the US, entering on a student visa often opens the door for you to get longer term residency in many countries. So there's that added advantage as well. Now, if you're thinking, because if you've lived in the US, you've been fed the propaganda that the United States is the greatest place in the world. Everybody wants to come there. No, they don't. And everything there is better than it is elsewhere. Healthcare, education. I hate to break this to you, but that is not true either. So when I mention the idea of studying outside of the US and you think, but won't my degree be looked down on? What you should realize is the world has changed. It is a very, very global place. It really, even previously, it really didn't matter where you went to university. There's very few professions where it is important where you went to university. Generally speaking, where you went to university is more important for things like networking and connections. But your ability to meet the job requirements, no. Okay. But the world is more global. Think about this world we live in with digital nomads, this idea of people living in different places, having experience and education from different places, and still being employed by American companies, if that's your goal. So no, I don't think that your degree will be looked down upon, especially if it's from a university that is accredited in that country. Now, are there bootleg schools in other countries as well? Probably. So avoid those. International experience is a resume booster. Think about why we often encourage people to study abroad for a year or a semester. Because employers like to see that you know how you've got cross-cultural communication and you know how to work with different people and in challenging environments. So if it's okay to study abroad for a semester, why isn't it okay to get your entire degree in another country? I think that your skills, including whatever language skills you can add to your resume by your time in another country, are going to go a long way in helping you get the position that you're interested in. And, I'll end with this. Because of what has happened in the last 9-10 years, from the 2014, 2015, from that on, our election, the gun violence, having a president be indicted on criminal charges, like all of these things, the pandemic and how they were handled in the US has done a lot to tarnish the United States reputation other places. So I don't know that the US is even held up as the beacon it used to be. I can tell you from my time teaching in China, I taught high school kids who were preparing to apply to study outside of China, and virtually none of them were applying to American universities. They were applying to Canadian universities. They were applying to Australian universities. These were kids whose parents had a lot of money. But none of them were applying to come to American universities. So this idea that the United States is the pinnacle, it is what everybody is striving for and how everything is judged against, I don't buy that anymore. So now that I've piqued your interest and you want to consider leaving the United States, either to live, to study, be sure that you pick up my Move Abroad checklist. It is linked below in the description. I also do one-on-one consults if you have specific questions that you'd like to be answered about the moving abroad process. If you want to book a one-on-one with me, did I say the link is below? You can go to pickygirltravelstheworld.com or bit.ly/askadelia. I would also suggest that you take a look. I've got a couple of videos I did recently on, if you're too broke to move abroad and how to find a job abroad if that is what is holding you back. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with somebody who you think would enjoy it as well. Give it a like here on YouTube. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, you should consider that as well.